I just wanted to give a quick background about myself and let you all know where I'm coming from. I'm Pranay Mehta. I'm a senior security and compliance analyst at Headspace, the mental health app. We have meditation, therapy, psychiatry, all in one app. Prior to this, I've worked at other organizations as well, like Fair Financials, Engage Learning, TCS, with a focus on healthcare compliance and privacy. I hold a master's degree in cybersecurity, doctoral certificate in business administration. And when I'm not running checklists, I love watching soccer. Liverpool's my favorite team, and I like going on hikes whenever it's sunny outside. So let's begin. Let's talk about the challenges that we face in the healthcare industry right now, specific to GRC. I keep seeing that LLMs get introduced everywhere across healthcare workflows. Product and leadership team want to add some LLM feature and AI feature in their product. Because of that, security teams face a lot of pressure to give a quick yes or a no answer for these products that want to be introduced in the care workflows, and they feel a lot of pressure while doing this. A lot of different frameworks arrive from different stakeholders. Legal might come in and say, hey, this workflow touches PHI, so you need to be compliant with HIPAA. Some other team wants to be compliant with NIST, some other team with ISO. And all of this brings a lot of engineering deadline as well. And the fourth problem that I keep seeing is that if we keep treating these frameworks as separate projects and end up answering the same questions around access control, logging and monitoring, backup, multiple times in multiple different formats. This duplication really slows down delivery and still doesn't produce any confident results for a lot of security teams. The goal today is to replace that with a shared language and to make decisions that can travel across all different teams as well. So what happens when leadership gets involved around these decisions? So when leadership is involved, the conversation becomes really simple. They don't really ask sub-controls or framework questions. They ask these four different questions in some way or the other. Are we protecting PHI? Is this secure enough to launch? Who is accountable for the risk and the decision? And if we move forward, are we going to regret this in the future? A good GRC approach should answer these questions very directly and should do it in a way that no one at the table is a framework or a sub-control expert. So I want to talk about where LLMs usually show up in care workplace settings that I've seen in organizations out there. I would say the first is patient chat, where LLMs and models show up for support and triage. The second is note assist, where models help draft summaries and write clinical notes. The third is around care operations, where models help route tasks and automate a lot of follow-ups and help with administrative stuff. All of these depend on a service layer that performs inference, applies guardrails, and generates logs. So if you're not protecting the service layer, you're not really protecting the data around it, and we're not really protecting any care workflows. So let's talk about the framework pile. This is like the alphabet soup that a lot of InfoSec and compliance team have to deal with. We have HIPAA, we have NIST CSF, we have HHS guidelines, we have executive orders as well, and we have AI-specific frameworks like the AI NIST RMF and ISO 42001. I'm not going to dive deep into each of these. You might already know them. The point is not what they are, but the point is that they all show up at once. Each one uses a different terminology and structure, but their intent really overlaps very heavily. The mistake is that we keep treating these as 6 different checklists and require 6 different work streams. In reality, they overlap very heavily, and they often want the same outcome, just with different labels. So instead of running 6 different checklists, I say we can run them by intent and group them by intent. So as I said previously, instead of directly operating HIPAA, NIST, or ISO and everything else, we should take a step back and really see and ask a simple question. What are these frameworks actually trying to solve? When you zoom out, all are aiming the same thing, that is reduce harm, protect sensitive data, and ensure accountable decisions. So rather than memorizing sub-controls, we should translate them into shared outcomes. This is very important psychologically as well, because when you go to an engineering or product team and say, hey, we need to be compliant with ISO subcontrol X or ISO NIST framework subcontrol C, that's when they'll disengage. But when you go to them and tell them, hey, we need to protect PHI and ensure safe output of data, that's when they'll start engaging with you and work towards a common solution. So what the map does is it becomes a transition layer between compliance and engineering teams and bridges that gap between different product teams as well. And once you have like a shared outcome, governance stops being like a document factory, but rather it makes the governance team help make clear and consistent decisions and lets the product and leadership team ship responsibly at the end. So now I wanted to talk about the 5 shared outcomes that we can align these frameworks into. The first is protect PHI and privacy. This is an obvious one, but it's worth saying out loud. It means confidentiality and integrity, but it also means appropriate use. It means we are clear what data is allowed to go in, what is not allowed to go in, and it helps us stay aligned with legal expectations like HIPAA and any contractual commitments as well. The second is strengthen security and resilience. This is classic security stuff, but posture stuff, but just on a different workflow. It's access control, encryption, logging and monitoring, and incident response. It also means resilience, meaning we can detect problems, contain them, and recover without any chaos in the environment. The third is accountability and transparency. This is where a lot of AI projects I feel get stuck. Nobody can answer basic questions like who owns this feature, who signed off on it, what are the risks accepted, and why were they accepted. Transparency over here doesn't mean exposing any company trade secrets, but it means that we can explain how the system works at a very reasonable level. And we can then defend these decisions later on as well. I would say the fourth is safe and effective AI use. This is an AI-specific dimension, and it's whether the output is reliable enough for the use case, what failure modes we can expect, and whether we have guardrails for any misuse in the workflows. It includes things like robustness against manipulation, bias concerns where relevant, and making sure the system actually does what it's supposed to do in real-world outcomes. And the fifth is govern and improve continuously. This is the part that makes it sustainable. It means monitoring what the system is doing, reviewing periodically, updating controls when the model or the feature changes, and having a clear path for responding if something goes wrong. AI features are not a set it and forget it, so governance also cannot be that for them. Now I feel this is why the framing works over here. When someone brings a new AI feature, you walk through these 5 outcomes and ask a simple question. Which of this does this feature impact, and what do we need to prove for each one of these outcomes? I just want to talk a little bit about the foundation as well. So before we start with threats and scoring, we need to start with visibility. Visibility is step 0. You cannot govern what you cannot see in your environment. First is create an inventory. For every LLM endpoint, internal or external, every of that endpoint needs an owner. That includes API embeddings in your third-party SaaS tools as well. Shadow AI is still AI and it causes a lot of risk in the environment. The second is PHI flow. You need to know where PHI enters, how it transforms, where it's stored, and where it exits. You need to include prompts, output logs, everything. The third is vendor path. Many healthcare teams assume that if we've signed a BA, we are secure. But if the LLM endpoint for that third-party vendor is at a sub-processor, or if it's in a completely different region that it's not supposed to be for your environment, those assumptions can be wrong. I feel most AI governance problems are actually just visibility problems in the end. And this is like the harmony table idea. So different frameworks use different labels, but they overlap a lot on outcomes. HIPAA, NIST, and HHS guidelines cover PHI and resilience. AI, RMF, and ISO frameworks bring explicit governance and AI safety languages. Executive orders emphasize visibility and secure practices. If you squint, these are different structures, but they all have the same intent. The mistake is running a HIPAA risk analysis, then separately running an ISO mapping or an AI RMF mapping. Instead, run one base system level assessment and then map them to the outputs that I had shown before. For example, your data flow diagram can satisfy HIPAA documentation requirements, AI RMF map expectations, and ISO documentation requirements all at the same time. If you do for other controls as well, this is how you eliminate a lot of duplicate work. So now let's look at some best practices out there. A lot of AI governance conversations get abstract very quickly. So we should bring it back into these defensible guardrails. These low effort guardrails help reduce a lot of risk in your environment. Region pinning reduces regulatory and contractual ambiguity. Training off and retention minimized reduces exposure and surface area. Data minimization reduces the blast radius. So least privilege limits who can see sensitive data and the inputs and outputs. Log hygiene ensures that you can detect misuse and abuse in your environment. These are not exotic AI controls, but are basic security practices applied to a new workflow. And if these are in place, most of the frameworks that we had listed before get satisfied at a very structural level as well. So now let's look at some AI-specific risk. Prompt injection is not theoretical. It's essentially input manipulation that can override instructions and trigger unintended tool use. The practical mitigation here is constraining tools and validating outputs before you take any action. Jailbreaks attempt to bypass guardrails. The mitigation here is testing prompts and monitoring all the outputs. Context leakage is especially sensitive in healthcare. If session boundary fails, PHI can cross context, which causes a lot of risk and also potentially harm. Mitigation here is tenant isolation, context scoping, and avoiding unnecessary sensitive data in your prompts. None of these, if you notice something, none of these require any exotic AI research teams. They require discipline and architecture and monitoring. Now that we have shared outcomes and baseline guardrails, we need to make decisions quickly and consistently. This is where the lightweight security risk analysis comes in. Over here, scope means defining the feature boundary, what data enters, what data leaves, and who owns it. Score means using a structured but simple method to estimate the risk. Decide means committing to a go, pilot, or hold decision tied to launch checkpoints. The goal is not to create a massive report, but to produce a repetitive engine that is backed by a small evidence packet. Every AI feature should run through the same path, and because of that, because of this consistency over time, you can start building a lot of trust in the environment. We'll walk these through in 3 stages of scope, score, and decide. Stage 1 is scoping the PHI flow. When I say scope, it's literally draw the flow on a whiteboard. If you can't draw it, you are not ready to assess the risk. You identify the feature, trace where PHI moves, identify who is involved. Keep the flow simple. For example, a patient app to an API to a prompt builder to an LLM service to clinical review, and include logs and monitoring as well. Then ask these 3 critical questions. Is there PHI in the prompts or outputs? Is there any data retention anywhere in the path, including logs and embeddings? And is it region pinned or otherwise controlled? If you cannot answer these questions confidently, you are not ready to score. This is where I feel 50% of AI governance gets solved over here. The second is scoring. You use a simple 4x4 grid. Likelihood on one axis, consequence on the other. Likelihood is about exposure and ease. How often does this feature run? How easy it is to misuse or exploit this? And how many users are exposed? Impact is about consequences. If something goes wrong, are we talking about a minor operational issue? Or are we talking about PHI exposure? Or in some workflows, even patient harm, which is more bad. Now I feel here is where some teams get it wrong. They try to be as specific as possible. They'll try to score this as like a 2.4 or a 3.2 in the risk scale. Rather, I would say use bands such as low, medium, high, or L1 to L4 and keep everything explainable. And one of the most important things I would say is write down assumption behind your score. For example, if retention is on by default, likelihood will increase because exposure duration will increase as well. Or if this feature generates clinical suggestions without any review, impact increases because unsafe output can cause a lot of harm. Now, you're not arguing upon opinions, but you're documenting assumptions. And here's why I would say why this risk matrix gets a little more powerful. You don't rescore if someone is feeling nervous about the score or if there's a new stakeholder in the meeting. You only rescore when the control changes. This consistency helps with decisions and makes it defensible to leadership and auditors as well. The grid over here does not eliminate risk, but it makes the risk explainable. And the explainable risk allows you to move forward much more responsibly. I would say this is where governance becomes more empowering than blocking. A go over here means there are controls are sufficient and evidence exists in the environment. A pilot means there are limited exposures, extra guardrails are required, and there's a defined review date again. Pilot is not a soft yes. So I would say pilot is not a soft yes, but it's a controlled decision that's on a timer. A hold means there's an unresolved high issue that requires either leadership input or you need to go back to the drawing board and redesign your workflow. Then you layer these in launch checkpoints, design, pilot, and production. At this stage, you define what must be true before you move forward and you make that visible to everyone upfront so there are no surprises in the end. The point is to turn risk decisions into a staged rollout plan so that you can learn safely in pilot and only graduate to production once the right guardrails are in place. This gives engineering clarity and they know what must be true between moving stages. And lastly, I would say, if you don't do this, at least produce these 3 artifacts. A one-page data flow diagram. This gives everyone, the security team, compliance, engineering teams, and auditors a shared visual understanding of where PHI enters, where it moves, and where it exits the system. Make it retention and region proof. This provides concrete evidence about data handling settings, and the data handling settings are configured that the way you claim it. It reduces ambiguity around storage, training, and geographic compliance as well. Third is access and logging snapshot. This demonstrates who can see the sensitive data, the inputs and outputs, shows that we are actively monitoring, and we also retain the data in such a way that is accountable and prone to incident response. So these 3 things eliminate a lot of risk and a lot of repetitive questions that auditors and leadership teams ask. So I would say collect them once and reuse them across different teams and different frameworks. Yep, that's it. I've created a Substack that I keep posting about telehealth. So if you all want to join, I've just started it. I'm I'll start posting more on it. But yeah, that's my talk. Thank you.